Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhi Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayamudirayeta. Good. Welcome back. We start a new chapter of the Mahabharata. We're still in the third book, the Aranya Parva, and we're going to stay in the third book for quite a while. Look how many chapters. 299 chapters, because how long did the Pandavas stay in the forest? 12 years. So we're seeing a lot of stories. And the stories, as we discussed in the last class, the stories are not merely to entertain. The stories are remember I gave the metaphor, the honey with the medicine. So the stories are the honey, and the spiritual teachings are the medicine, so to speak. So in the context of these delightful stories, we get some profound spiritual teachings, as we'll see in the chapter today. When the Pandavas were in the forest, they had an opportunity to meet many interesting characters. Some very odd, some very saintly. They met Vyasa in the forest. They met Sri Krishna in the forest. We're skipping over some of that because we're choosing only those chapters that are filled with Vedantic teachings. So a lot of those chapters are more concerned with the storyline, and we're not spending too much time with the storyline. Among the many rishis the Pandavas saw in the forest was Markandeya. And this segment and the next one we'll see are about Markandeya. We need to know a little bit about who was Rishi Markandeya. The name means the son of Mrikandu. So who is Mrikandu? Mrikandu was a saintly Brahmana who was a Shiva Bhakta. He was very devoted to Lord Shiva, and he had prayed to Lord Shiva for the birth of a son, and Lord Shiva gave him a choice of boons. You don't always get a choice, right? So he had a choice. His choice was he could have a brilliant son. Mrikandu, the Brahmana, could either have a brilliant son, an amazing, brilliant son who would live for only 16 years, or he could have a very average, dull-witted son who would live 100 years. This was his choice. A dull-witted, long-lived son, or a brilliant, short-lived son. Mrikandu, of course, chose the 16 years of brilliant son. So that's what he received. And Markandeya was born and proved to be absolutely brilliant and amazed everyone and had a wonderful life, very devoted to parents, very devoted also to Lord Shiva. So the story concludes that after 16 years, who comes? Yama. Lord Yama comes. The story is kind of cute. So the story goes, there are several ways it's told, but the usual way is Markandeya is praying at a Shivalinga, and Yama comes. And Markandeya, wanting to be protected by Lord Shiva from Yama, he wraps his arms around the linga. But Yama is determined to get him, and Yama is often represented, some of you know, he's often represented as having a noose. He puts that noose around you, and then you've had it. By the way, Yama, I pointed out the Sanskrit meaning. Yama means the controller, the one who is absolutely in control. Once that noose goes around you, you're finished. So Markandeya has his arms wrapped around this Shivalinga, and Yama throws this noose over Markandeya, which also falls over the linga. And Lord Shiva responds. So here, Yama has got his noose over the linga. Lord Shiva responds by appearing in some powerful form. And Lord Shiva defeats Yama. It's a really elaborate story. We just leave it a little bit simple for now. Lord Shiva defeats Yama and gives Markandeya a unique boon. The boon is to be a Chiranjeevi. Chiranjeevi. Chira means long. Jeevi, life. One whose life is long. So the boon was for Markandeya to remain 16 years old for a long time. Chiranjeevis are not immortal. Chiranjeevis live for a very, very long time without aging. In the scriptures there are several who are held to be Chiranjeevi. Hanuman was a Chiranjeevi. Vyasa himself was a Chiranjeevi, which means they remained at the same age for a long, long time. Who else was? Parashurama. Anyway, there's a traditional list of 7 Chiranjeevis, and it turns out Markandeya didn't make it to the list, so we'll call him the 8th Chiranjeevi. He received that boon, so he remained at 16 years of age. Now, remaining 16 years of age for kalpa after kalpa, not immortal, but for kalpa after kalpa. We'll see the significance of that observation, that he lived to see several kalpas come and go. We see that in the next chapter. In this chapter, we're just meeting him for the first time. We, meaning the Pandavas, are meeting him for the first time. And this is actually the first chapter of a long section in this Aranya Parva. The section, these parvas are so long, they have subtitles. The subtitle here is Markandeya Samasya Parva, the parva in which the Pandavas meet Markandeya. It goes on for 42 chapters. Just 42 chapters with Markandeya. We're going to see 4 of those chapters, and we'll start with these chapters 180 and 181 this morning. Let's begin. Vaishampano vacha Kamyakam prapya kaunteya Kamyakam prapya Yudhishthira purogamaha Yudhishthira puro Kritatitya muniganayar Kritatitya munigra Nishedu saha Krishnaya. So Rishi Vaishampayana is narrating all of this to King Janamejaya. And so he narrates the next part of the story. This is the very beginning of that section on Markandeya. So Kamyakam prapya Kaunteyaha, the sons of Kunti, the 5 Pandavas. We know there are 6, but right now we only know about 5. So Kaunteyaha, those 5 sons of Kunti, prapya, having reached, Kamyakam means Kamyaka forest, a particular forest. So where they lived for many years, having reached that forest, Yudhishthira Purogamaha, they were led by Yudhishthira. The Pandavas were led by Yudhishthira as they entered that forest. And then in that forest, they were Krita Atityaha. Atityaha are the rituals of greeting. Munaganaihi, by the Munis who lived in that forest, in the Kamyaka Aranya. In the forest, the rishis were living there. The rishis saw the Pandavas coming. It's a big deal. It's like when somebody important shows up at your home. It's a big deal. So here the Pandavas are arriving at the Kamika forest. So all the munis, the rishis who live there, it's a big deal. So Krita Atityaha. The Pandavas are received with all the formalities, all the rituals, and then thereafter, Nisheduhu. They lived there in the Kamika, the Pandavas lived there in the forest. Krishnaya Saha, along with Krishna, not Krishna, Krishna. Who was that? Draupadi. So along with Draupadi, they lived there in that forest for many years. Atapaschatapo vridho, atapaschatapo bahuvarsha sahasradrika, bahuvarsha pratyadrishyata dharmatma, pratyadrishyata Markandeyo mahatapaha, Markandeyo mahatapaha. Atapaschat, and then later, you have to, in the third line, pratyadrishyata. Somebody was seen. Who was seen? In the next line, Markandeya. Markandeya was pratyadrishyata. He was seen by the Pandavas. And about this Markandeya, Markandeya here is described as tapo vridhaha. Vridha usually means aged, but here aged not in years because he was always 16. So he wasn't aged in years, but he was aged in tapas. He had done so much tapas, therefore he is called tapovriddha. He was aged in, I translated here, wise with austerities. That sounds good. He was, Markandeya was Bahu Varsha Sahasra Drik. Varsha Sahasra, 1,000 years. Bahu, many thousands of years. Drik, he lived through many thousands of years, always being 16 years of age. Markandeya is also described here as Dharmatma. Simple meaning is a holy man. A holy person is called Dharmatma, one who always follows Dharma. And he was Mahatapaha. He was a very intense practitioner of tapas. It was because of his intense devotion to Lord Shiva that he was spared from Yama. You know, to be spared from Yama, it's not very ordinary, right? So suppose at the end of my life, I start praying, "Oh Shiva, oh Shiva, oh Shiva, oh Shiva." Guess what? I don't think it's going to make any difference. Yama will come and take me away. Why? I'm not like Markandeya. I don't have the intensity of tapas that was practiced by Markandeya. So because of the intent, he was known for the intensity of his tapas. So here he is called Mahatapaha, the one who practiced intense austerities. Then, Tam vivakshantam halakshya, tam vivakshantam ha, Kuru rajo mahamunim, Kuru raj. Katha sanjananarthaya, Katha sanjananar, Chodayamasa pandavaha, Chodayamasa. In the second line, Kuru Rajaha, the king of the Kurus, who is Yudhishthira. What did he do in the last line? Chodayamasa Pandava. Pandava, that Yudhishthira, the one Pandava known as Yudhishthira, what did he do? He Chodayamasa. He encouraged who? Now back to the first line, him. He encouraged who? Mahamunim, that great sage. He encouraged Markandeya. Markandeya, who was Vivakshantam Alakshya. Yudhishthira, alakshya, having seen that tam, Markandeya, was vivakshantam. He literally, he wanted to speak. Seeing that Markandeya had arrived, and seeing Markandeya was vivakshantam, inclined to speak. Therefore, Yudhishthira chodayamasa, he encouraged Markandeya to speak, which means what? He asked Markandeya to say something, as we'll see in the next verse. Why? Kata sanjana artaya. For the sake of sanjana, for the sake of creating a kata, for the sake of hearing a story, for the sake of hearing a story about dharma. We observed in the last chapter that Yudhishthira, even though he was Dharma Raja, even though he was the most exalted knower of dharma, he always wanted to know more. He always talked about it. It's almost, this is not a great example, but someone who is really focused on their profession, right? Like somebody who's really focused on their engineering profession or medical profession. Then they come home and all they can talk about is their engineering work or their medical work. There are people who are like that. Scientists, different professionals are sometimes like that. It's the only thing they want to talk about. It's the only thing they want to think about. Yudhishthira was like that. The only thing he wanted to talk about or think about was dharma. So when his great austere Rishi Markandeya arrives in the forest, what does Yudhishthira think? This is a great opportunity for more discussions about dharma. Therefore, chodayamasa Mahamunim. Yudhishthira encouraged the great sage Markandeya to speak, and Yudhishthira said, Yudhishthira vacha, Yudhishthira vacha, bhavatyeva hi me buddhir, bhavatyeva hi me buddhir. There's a typo here. It should be drishtva. Drishtvatmanam sukhachutam, Drishtvatmanam sukhachutam, Dhartarashtranscha durvrittan, Dhartarashtranscha durvrit, Ridhyatha preksha sarvashaha, Ridhyatha preksha sarvashaha. So Yudhishthira, I'm just reflecting on this is like a idiomatic expression. Yudhishthira says, Bhavati eva hi me buddhihi. It says, me buddhihi, my mind. Bhavati eva hi. My mind is like this. There's an American expression where you want to give someone a piece of your mind. And that's kind of what this expresses. Yudhishthira has something on his mind. And the American expression, he wants to get it off his chest. There's something wrong with that American expression, right? If it's in your mind, why do you want to get it off your chest? Sorry. That's the American expression is a little bit off, in my opinion, but that's okay. So, there is something troubling Yudhishthira. That's what he says, me buddhihi bhavati. There's something on my mind, something troubling Yudhishthira that he wants to share with this great Rishi Markandeya and basically get his advice. So what is troubling Yudhishthira? He says, drishtva, having seen atmanam, myself, having seen myself sukhat chutam, having seen myself deprived of sukha. How was he deprived of sukha? They were all kicked out of the palace for 12 plus 1 years. They were sent into exile. Remember, they had lived a glorious, kingly, princely life in the palace, in the kingdom, and as a result of the dice games, they were sent into exile for 13 years. And so therefore he says, drishtva Atmanam, reflecting on what happened to me, what happened to him, Sukhat Chutam. He was deprived of all that happiness of living in the palace. And also, dhartarashtrancha durvrittan ridhyataha prekshya sarvashaha. So he's reflecting on himself. He's also reflecting on the sons of Dhritarashtra. So, drishtva atmanam, reflecting on himself, also dhartarashtran prekshya. Prekshya, reflecting on dhartarashtran, the sons of Dhritarashtra, most notably Duryodhana. So thinking about Duryodhana and his brothers, Duryodhana and his brothers who are durvrittan, always engaged in wrong actions, harmful actions, adharmic actions. So he reflects that the Duryodhana and his brothers, who are durvrittan, always engaged in harmful actions, what happens to them? Ridhyataha, they are prospering. Riddhi is prosperity. Ridhyataha, they are prospering sarvashaha, in all ways, in all manners possible. Seeing this, so the rest of the question comes in the next verse. Before we see the rest of his question, just get what he is saying. He looks at himself, and do you remember several months ago we saw that dialogue between Draupadi and Yudhishthira? Draupadi made this very same observation. Back in that chapter, Draupadi said, "Oh Yudhishthira, you always follow dharma, and you are exiled to the forest. The sons of Dhritarashtra, they never followed dharma, and they are enjoying the glories of the palace." This was Draupadi's observation, an observation of the unfairness of karma, the apparent unfairness of karma. We're coming back to that very topic. Same topic comes here in a different way. Here, instead of Draupadi making the observation, it is Yudhishthira. He observes himself that Yudhishthira would say, I always followed dharma, and here I am, exiled to the forest, deprived of the happiness that I had in the palace. On the other hand, Duryodhana and his brothers, who always are violating codes of dharma, look at them. They are prospering. They're living a great life in the palace. Ridhyataha sarvashaha. They are prospering in every way. So Yudhishthira is thinking about the unfairness about this. So he concludes his question. Karmana purusha karta, karmana purusha kart, shubhasyapya shubhasya cha, shubhasyapya shubhas, swapalam tarupashnati, swapalam katam karta swedishvaraha, katam karta swedishvaraha. So he's reflecting, Yudhishthira is reflecting on the doctrine of karma and wondering, how does this unfairness come about according to the doctrine of karma? He observes that purushaha karta karmanaha. Purushaha, a person, is the karmanaha karta, agent of action. Karmanaha, of action, karta, agent. A person is the agent of action, whether that action is shubha or ashubha. Karmanaha, shubhasya, of good actions, dharmic actions, api, and karmanaha ashubhasya, for actions which are ashubha, actions which are contrary to dharma, actions which are harmful. He says in both cases, purushaha is the karta. A person is the agent of action. So what? Well, the basic principle of karma is whoever does an action should get the result, should get the phala. So he says, swapalam tat upashnati. Upashnati. The person, swapalam, the result of his own action. Tat, he. Upashnati. He receives the results of the actions that he committed. But there's a problem here. So Yudhishthira did only good actions. Did he get good results? He should have gotten good results. He didn't. The Duryodhana and his brothers did only harmful actions. Did they receive undesirable results? No, they received desirable results. So what's going on? There must be another factor. So he's saying, Purusha Karta, this is the essence of the argument. The person is the agent of his actions, but there must be another factor involved in producing the results. Here we are back to the doctrine of karma. What do we say according to the doctrine of karma is you choose the actions, you do not choose the results. Have we heard that anywhere? Maybe in the Bhagavad Gita? Karmani eva adhikara hate ma paleshu kadachana. That's exactly what it says. In chapter 2, that's famous verse, you can look it up, chapter 2, verse 47, and this is what everyone quotes, and it's a wonderful verse. You choose, and I know this word adhikara is so often misinterpreted. Adhikara means you have control over, you have choice over. You have choice over your actions, but you have no control over the results, which means there's another factor. You are one factor. Purushaha karta. The person is the agent of committing good karmas and not so good karmas. You choose, you commit those karmas, but in receiving the results, there is another factor, and about that other factor he refers to in the last line. He says, "Katam karta swat ishvaraha." If I were to paraphrase this, I'll paraphrase the whole verse to give you the kind of the sense of the Sanskrit. Yudhishthira says, a person reaps the results of their actions, good and bad, and then Ishvara gets involved. That's the sense of this verse. It says, Katam swat, somehow or another, Ishvaraha karta. Ishvara is also an agent. Ishvara is also involved. Even though you are engaged, even though a person is engaged in doing good and bad actions and receiving the results, it's more complicated than that. Why? Katansvat, somehow or another, Ishvaraha karta. Ishvara is involved. And Ishvara is involved how? Remember when we saw those chapters in that dialogue between Draupadi and Yudhishthira about the doctrine of karma? I want to return to one key concept in that chapter. We won't return to the whole chapter. But a key concept in the chapter is understanding Ishvara as karma phala data. This is an extremely important expression. Karma phala, you know, as a result of action. Data, the giver of the results of action. Ishvara is the karma phala data, the giver of the results of action. And that's what that verse in chapter 2 of the Gita was referring to. Karmani, with regard to action, te, you, adhikaraha. You have control, you have authority over the actions you commit, but ma paleshu, you have no control over the results that come. Why? The results are given by Ishvara. You do the work, Ishvara gives the results. This is the idea. Almost like, well, you know, if you have a job, you go to work, you do all the work. Who gives you the result? You get that paycheck. So the company or your boss gives you the paycheck. So you look at the ignorance that would come if you thought that my work directly creates that paycheck. If you think that's so, make your boss really angry and see if you still get that paycheck. And you'll find out that your hard work is not the only factor involved in getting that paycheck. There's another factor involved. That factor is Ishvara as karma paladata, as a giver of fruits of action. And in order to understand the significance of this, I guess one little bit of that prior chapter, the dialogue between Draupadi and Yudhishthira, we have to go back and pick up a little part of it. Because if Ishvara is karma paladata, the pala he's giving is twofold. And we have to go back to that. Let's make sure we remember that part. Thank you. So Ishvara as karma pala data. Again, data means giver. The giver of karma pala, the results of our action. But here we need to remember that this karma pala is twofold. Remember the twofold division. This twofold division is really the foundation on which the entire doctrine of karma is based. The entire doctrine of karma is based on a division between drishta pala. Remember this? Sure you do. Drishta and adrishta. So there are some palas which are drishta, seen immediate results. There are other palas which are adrishta, unseen, deferred results. And I think the example I gave many classes ago is if I take this pen and fling it at you, there are two results for that action. One result is a drishta pala. The drishta pala is I no longer have the pen. There's also an adrishta pala. What is the adrishta pala? It depends. If I fling this pen at you and it hit you in the head and hurt, then the adrishta pala is, since I committed a harmful act, I will be the recipient of an undesirable result at some time in the future. Notice, one action, two results. One karma, two kinds of pala. Drishta pala, adrishta pala. The first pala is immediate and seen. Drishta literally means seen. Adrishta means unseen. It's the deferred result. Give the other example. Suppose you say, Swamiji, can I borrow your pen? I give you the pen. What is a drishta pala? I no longer have a pen. What is the adrishta pala? Since I did an act of kindness for you, I should be the recipient of something good in the future. That is the adrishta pala. This twofold division is the basis for the entire doctrine of karma. Now, what is Yudhishthira's complaint, as it were, in this chapter? He says, Katansud Ishvara Karta. Somehow Ishvara is getting in the mix, as they say in American English. He's interfering. Here's what Yudhishthira is saying. He's saying that I did all kinds of good actions, and I'm getting undesirable results. Notice, Yudhishthira did all acts of good, all good acts, dharmic acts, which means he created Yudhishthira through his dharmic acts. He received a lot of drishta pala from his good acts. His good acts resulted in a drishta pala. What? He was highly respected. He was called Dharma Raja. He was beloved by all the people of the kingdom. So you can't say that his good acts had no results. His good acts absolutely had a lot of results. Yet, in spite of everyone loved him and everyone respected him, he still ended up exiled to the forest. How did that happen? Well, there is a second kind of pala, adrishta pala, which means the results of past actions. Past actions probably not done in this life. In the case of Yudhishthira, in prior lives, most likely he committed harmful acts. Not in this life, according to his story. He was very pious in this life, but certainly in some pious life he must have committed some sinful actions. So as a result, he was born with certain adrishtapalas, certain karmas, which were the results of those past harmful actions, and he received these adrishtapalas from whom? Ishvara. So he has control over the actions he does and the drishtapala he receives. He has no control over these adrishtapalas which are happening in his life. Who's in charge, so to speak? Who chooses the adrishtapalas that will affect him in this life? Ishvara. That's what he is saying in this verse. He says, Purusha Karta, a person is the agent of their good and bad actions. Those good and bad actions create drishtapala in life. On the other hand, there is also adrishtapala affecting us in life. And these adrishtapalas are not under the control of the Purusha. These adrishtapalas are in the hands of Ishvara. So he says in this verse, Katamsvat, in some way or another, Ishvara Karta. Ishvara is also the agent. I am the agent, Yudhishthira says, I am the agent who created this drishtapala, but Ishvara is the agent who gives this adrishtapala. And this puzzles Yudhishthira. He wants to understand, how does this work? What is going on that I should be so pious and do all of these good actions, and yet I should be exiled to the forest? So this is what's on his mind. This is what is troubling him. And when he sees Markandeya, Yudhishthira wants to share this, his troubled thoughts with Markandeya, and basically to get Markandeya's advice on this topic, which he receives. Markandeya uvacha, Markandeya. Ayam hari sharirena, ayam hari sharirena, deva srishtena manavaha, deva srishtena, shubhanama shubhanam cha, shubhanam kurute sanchayam mahata, kurute sanchayam. Good. This chapter is a nice complement. This chapter is on the doctrine of karma, but it is really complementary to the 3 chapters we studied before about that dialogue between Draupadi and Yudhishthira that also talked about the doctrine of karma. We're going to talk about an aspect of the doctrine of karma which was not discussed at all in those 3 chapters. And in summary, the topic that's going to be discussed here are 3, it's confusing if I say 3 kinds of karma. If I say 3 kinds of karma, you say, Swamiji, you just said there are 2 kinds. Now I'm going to say, no, there are 3 kinds. They're different in different contexts. There are these 2 kinds of results of karma, but there's a different way of categorizing karmas. The different way of categorizing karmas is this, and this is the subject matter of this chapter. Agami. Agami karmas are the karmas you commit now in this life. Then we're also going to discuss prarabdha, which we did discuss partially in that prior chapter. Prarabdha are the karmas committed in past lives, but fructifying now. So these are past karmas, but they are fructifying now, which means they are bearing their fruits now. How do you spell this? Fructifying. Now, Sanskrit is easier. And then there's now the third kind. The third kind, most of you know as Sanchita. Sanchita is past karmas, not fructifying now. And I'll explain all of this. All right. Since the whole chapter is going to talk about these three, let's get these three understood, and then the verses will make more sense. Agami are the actions you do now. Today you chose to come to class. Coming to class is an agami karma. Notice, actually that's a good way of separating these two. These are, well, now, for this agami karma, this karma that you're committing now, you get a result. You get a result for actions that you are committing now. So the results, I think coming to the ashram for class would be a punya karma or a papa karma. Do you know, could be a papa karma under a certain circumstance, right? Suppose there was an important family thing of like a marriage. Your niece or nephew is getting married. And suppose you were to say, your marriage is Saturday morning, forget it. I'm going to the ashram. Hey, I'm telling you, that would be a papa karma. To come to the ashram in violation of a family responsibility would actually be a papa karma. Interesting observation. The same action can have different consequences depending on the context. You understand that. So, agami karma is the results of actions you commit now in the current life. Prarabdha karmas are the results of actions you've committed in prior lives, but specifically those past actions which will bear their fruits in this life. And that distinguishes it from Sanchita karma. Why? Sanchita literally means accumulated, and that's what we're going to be talking about in this verse. Sanchita means accumulated. Accumulated karma means what? The karma's left over when you die. Like, the term leftover sounds like food, but maybe it's a good metaphor. When you're done eating, there are leftovers. What do you do with the leftovers? Well, in American culture, you put them in the refrigerator and you eat them at a later time. So, sanchita karma, in fact, that's a nice metaphor. So, agami karma means eating the food now. Sanchita karma means the food in your refrigerator. Prarabdha karma means you take the food out of the refrigerator tomorrow and eat it. Now, I've never used that metaphor, but it makes sense. Here's why. The refrigerator represents an accumulation of past karmas. Of course, one difference is you're not going to store food in a refrigerator from an infinite number of prior meals. However, sanchita karma, properly understood, is an accumulation of karmas left over from an infinite number of prior lives. We have several things to discuss. First of all, let's be very clear, and many people struggle with this. There is no first life for a person. You didn't get born a first time. Here, he talks about ayam adi sharirena. Adi sharirena. Adi sharira is an expression for the sukshma sharira, subtle body. The subtle body represents your The distinction, physical body is very well known. It's what you observe. The subtle body, sukshma sharira, is everything about you that is not tangible. Everything about you that you can't touch, that you can't grab. Like what? Like your mind? Your mind, your emotions, your memories? Are those important parts of who you are? Vitally important. How about your capacity to walk and talk? Those are different from your legs and mouth. Legs and mouth are stula, but the capacity to walk and talk, the power of walking and talking, is non-physical. Similarly, all of your sense powers, sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell, all of these non-physical, non-tangible aspects of who you are collectively are your sukshma sharira. That sukshma sharira is said to travel from one body to the next body to the next body. And the bodies need not all be human bodies, but we don't want to get into all the details of the doctrine of reincarnation right now, but you understand the general outline. But here comes a question, and that was, when was the first time my sukshma sharira, here called Adi Sharira. Adi means first. So first Sharira doesn't mean the first time you got born. First Sharira means this is the second. Physical body is the second Sharira. Adi Sharira, first Sharira, refers specifically to the Sukshma Sharira. Leading to this question, when was the first time my subtle body got associated with a physical body? We've got a problem here. According to what does a subtle body acquire a physical body? A subtle body acquires a physical body according to karma, right? That's the basic teachings of the doctrine of karma. According to your karma, you will gain a body. We just saw that in the prior chapter. So, according to karma, suppose you have a sukshma sharira who is acquiring the first body. Can you acquire karma without a body? Can you do anything without a body? You can't do anything without a body. You can't commit karma without a body. You can't accumulate karma without a body. So if we imagine that there's a first time that a subtle body acquires a physical body, if that's your assumption, do you see the logical problem? If it's the first time, then there should be some karma to acquire that physical body, but there has been no prior physical body with which the subtle body could accumulate any karma. Do you see the logical inconsistency? You need a body to commit karma, but before your first body, you have no karma. So therefore, how could karma give you the first body? It's absolutely impossible. It is logically inconsistent to imagine that there was a first birth for your subtle body. It is logically inconsistent. Then what do the scriptures teach us? The scriptures teach us it's called pravaha nityatva. Your subtle body is eternal. But watch this. Not eternal in the way that Atma is eternal. But they use the term pravaha nityatva. A little technical, but we haven't talked about this. You might find this helpful. I think it's helpful. There are two kinds of nityatva. Usually when we say nitya means eternal, and we say Atma is eternal, Atma is unborn, uncreated, unchanging, etc., etc. We've talked about that so many times. There's a second kind of eternality. It's called, it's a little technical, but I think you'll appreciate it. Pravaha nityatva. Nityatva means the state of being eternal. Nityatva. Pravaha nityatva is a state of being eternal in the form of a pravaha, a flow. An eternal flow. And the metaphor that's always given is that of a river. The river is nitya, assuming it doesn't dry up. Some rivers dry up in a dry season. Assuming the river never dries up, it's constantly flowing. There is a constant flow. The river you see before you is never the same river. We could say there's a constant succession, an unchanging succession. A continual succession of the river. Suppose you were to say, when did the first bit of river come? Now, if you start thinking like a geologist, it's not going to be very, very helpful. This is a metaphor. It's a metaphor. So from the standpoint of the metaphor, that river is an unending flow, and a river that, not a flow that has no end, and a flow that had no beginning. This is the metaphor. The flow of a river is endless. The flow of a river is beginningless. So we call this pravaha nityatva. We don't use this metaphor for Atma at all. Why? The river is constantly changing. Atma never changes. So this metaphor, pravaha nityatva, is not used for Atma, it's used for your subtle body, sukshma sharira. So if the river is understood as a beginningless process of flow, in the same way the sukshma sharira is understood to be part of a beginningless flow, a beginningless sequence of one subtle body after another subtle body after another subtle body. A subtle body takes one physical body, then a subtle body takes another physical body, then a subtle body takes yet another physical body. That's the process we're talking about. That's the pravaha, the flow or cycle we're talking about. So now if we say, when was the first one? We've answered the question. We said there was no first birth for that subtle body. If there was no first birth, if there was no first time the subtle body assumed a physical body, then, mathematically speaking, how many prior lives have you had? Remember learning in mathematics about number lines? You'll hate this. Remember seeing something like this? A number line, where this is minus infinity and plus infinity. So if we were to start adding up all the numbers on this number line, how many would we add up? Infinite. So if there was no first birth for your subtle body, how many prior lives have you had? The number is infinite. Now, this is actually important to understand. If we don't understand this, we'll never understand completely the doctrine of karma. We didn't have any of this discussion in those prior chapters, so it's good that we're talking about this now. This is essential to understand the doctrine of karma. We begin by saying there was no first birth for the subtle body. You have had an infinite number of prior births. And consider in each birth, in each human birth, we'll say, in each human birth you commit good actions and bad actions. In each human birth, you receive the drishtapala for your good and bad actions. In each human birth, you may or may not receive all the adrishtapala for the actions you commit. Which means, remember my pen example? So if I threw this hard and it hit you and hurt you, I would receive an adrishtapala for that. Would it come in this life or later? We don't know. There's no rule. I may receive that result in this life. I may not receive that result in this life. In a given life, we commit how many karmas? Oh my gosh, we couldn't imagine. We couldn't begin to count. Now look at this. For the many, many, many karmas you commit in this life, you will receive all of the drishtapalas for all of the many, many karmas you commit in this life, and you will receive some of the adrishtapalas for all of the many, many karmas you commit in this life. You're with me so far? Watch. If you receive only some of the many, many karmas, of the adrishtapalas of all the karmas you commit, which means when you die, there will be some adrishtapalas left over. We're back to our central metaphor. When you're done eating, there are leftovers. When you end this life, there are leftovers. The leftovers from your table go in your refrigerator. The leftover karmas from your life are accumulated and called Sanchita karma. So think of Sanchita karma as your what a terrible metaphor. Sanchita karma is like your refrigerator full of food. And as I said before, where the metaphor breaks down, your Sanchita refrigerator contains the leftover karmas from how many lives? An infinite number of prior lives. It must be a pretty big refrigerator. A refrigerator large enough to accommodate an infinite number of punya karmas, an infinite number of papa karmas. That is that is the sanchita karma. Sanchita literally means accumulated. So every person has this so-called karmic refrigerator. I'm coining that word for the first time. It's very peculiar. I may not use this metaphor again, but I'm enjoying it right now. Your karmic refrigerator. I think my Paramaguru, Puja Swami Chinmayananda, would use a bank account metaphor. He liked to use his bank account metaphor. It's like you keep putting it putting money in the bank, etc., or taking money out of the bank. Anyway, let's stay with this refrigerator. It's more fun. So you have your refrigerator sanchita karma. It contains an infinite number of karmas, which means an infinite number of good karmas and an infinite number of the other karmas. Correct? Okay. Now, should we see this verse yet? Well, actually, we can see what it says so far. So, here, ayam manavaha, this person, adi sharirena, by means of his subtle body, deva srishtena, which was created by God. What does the person do? The person, kurute, does what? Sanchaya mahat. Creates the accumulation of mahat sanchayam, of a great accumulation of karma. Of what kind of karma? Shubhanam, of good karma. Ashubhanam, of so-called bad karma. Kurute, the person does Mahat sanchayam, a great accumulation. Great accumulation really means infinite accumulation. And how does he do so? Shariren, adi sharirena, by means of the subtle body. Just if you're wondering why does he put that point in, this is Vedanta. We really need to understand this. Does your physical body commit actions? Or is your physical body an instrument used by you to commit actions? Clear, right? Your physical body is not the agent of action. You are the agent of action. Your physical body is like an instrument. You make your arm go up and down, etc., etc. So your arm doesn't go up and down independently. You make it go up and down. It is an instrument. You are the agent. Now, when we say you are the agent, here's more Vedanta. Is Satchidananda Atma the agent? Is consciousness the agent? And those of you who have been in enough of these classes, you've heard many times taught that consciousness is unchanging. Consciousness reveals all the actions that take place in your mind. Consciousness reveals all mental activities, including mental activities about deciding to do an action and doing an action. The point I'm making is your physical body is not the agent of action, nor is consciousness, your true self, Atma, is also not the agent of action. So let's put it different words. To whom does agency belong? Agency cannot belong. Prior verse he said, Purusha Karta. Yudhishthira said that the person is the agent. Now we go into more detail. Who is the agent? Is the physical body the agent of action? No. Is unchanging consciousness, Atma, the agent of action? No. Then who is the agent of action? There's only one thing left. Adi Sharira. The subtle body is the agent of action. And that's really important because who gets the result? What Yudhishthira said 2 verses ago, the agent of action receives the result. So, agent of action is associated with the Sukshma Sharira. The Sukshma Sharira owns the results. So, what are we saying? Who owns all of these karmas? The infinite karmas in your Sanchita refrigerator, the infinite karmas stored in your refrigerator, who owns them? Who is going to reap those results? Your subtle body. Now, we'll introduce the next class, because, are we done with this verse? Yes. So, what we're going to see in the next verse, we have a problem. Your refrigerator, your karmic refrigerator, is full of an infinite number of karmas, mahat sanchayam, an infinite accumulation, which is shubhanam, ashubhanancha, an infinite accumulation of good karmas and bad karmas. If your refrigerator is absolutely full with an infinite amount of karmas, can you empty your refrigerator in one meal? I'm liking this metaphor better as we go along. It's not bad. But just to share with you, one of the fun things about teaching is, do you know this style of teaching I've received from Puja Swami Tadatmananda? We don't plan things out in advance. It's kind of more spontaneous. The fun part about it is unique things can come in the class. This is something I think unique and very good. So you have this infinite accumulation of karma in the refrigerator. It can't all come out of that refrigerator in one time for one meal. One meal represents one life. Right? That's our metaphor. So what happens is you take a portion of the food out of that refrigerator, enough for one meal. From your infinite sanchita karma, what gives rise to one birth. Suppose you were, to empty the infinite refrigerator, what kind of meal would that be? You'd have an infinite amount of food to eat. In the same way, if this infinite accumulation of karma came into one life, how long would you have to live to exhaust that infinite amount of karma? You'd have to live an infinite life. Not possible. So that's why our metaphor. From that karmic refrigerator, sanchita karma, you take a finite portion, enough for one meal. Meaning from your infinite accumulation of sanchita karma comes a finite portion, enough for one life. That next life is based then on prarabdha karma. The very next verse is going to talk about prarabdha karma. The verse after that is going to talk about agami karma. So in this chapter, we're going to get a very methodical description of Sanchita, prarabdha, and agami karma, which is crucial to really understand the doctrine of karma. We didn't get this topic in those prior chapters, the dialogue between Draupadi and Yudhishthira. Now we have this opportunity in this chapter. We'll continue with this in the next class. All right. Some announcements. Tomorrow, Sunday, I need to remind you that we have some classes that go on hiatus over the summer months. Those classes include our children's program, our teen program. Also, Vasanti's mindful awareness meditation program usually occurs on Sundays. It's on hiatus until September. On the other hand, tomorrow I still have at 6:15 satsang, except tomorrow we're having an advanced meditation session, always on the first Sunday of each month, which means tomorrow. So please come and join us at 6:15 tomorrow. I will conduct an advanced meditation. And then I'll remind you again that on June 4th, Saturday, we have our 16th anniversary celebration. Please mark your calendar, plan on coming. And we're just now finishing up collecting ads and messages for our souvenir. So we have another nice souvenir. Volunteers are working on preparing it. I think the volunteers are struggling a little bit still to finish. So please give them a hand. If you have some, if you can give them a message or a advertisement for the souvenir, please do so. You can see Lata in front here. She can answer your questions on the counter, our forms, and sample souvenirs. We have a small project today. The reason I'm looking around is I want you see something very odd. Do you see these lines? Looks a little bit like a zebra on our walls. You know, the project, by the way, is to wash the walls, and I just want to explain what happened. This took me a while to figure out, why do those lines form? Can you figure it out? It's more complicated than you think. What happens is inside these walls, you see the lines? So what happens is inside the walls are steel studs. The steel studs are resting against the concrete block on the outside and the drywall on the inside. In winter, those concrete blocks get really cold. When it's 20 degrees outside, those concrete blocks are 20 degrees. The steel conducts that coldness. It actually conducts heat away anyway. But what happens is, as a result of the steel studs resting against the drywall makes a cold spot on the wall. This is what happens. Where the steel stud is inside the wall, it becomes extremely cold, so cold that water condenses on the wall. I'm boring the heck out of you. But now I have to finish. So water condenses just on those cold spots on the wall, and those water droplets contain dust. That's why our walls look like a zebra. If you look around the hall, you see in back and on the sides we got these zebra spots. Anyway, sorry for boring you. What we would like is we could use 15 or 20 of you to stay. And it comes right off. It's just dust, and you're just going to just wash and rinse, and it goes very quickly. If we have 15 or 20 of you, it'll go really fast. They also have volunteers have prepared a nice lunch for you. So please stay back. Very simple job, just to wash the walls, and it'll keep the place looking nice. Thank you for your help. Library will be open after class. We'll conclude with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.